And I would proceed now with my presentation, which in some way continues our talks and in some way is completely opposite. So this is what I, before just start, want to prefix. The previous 3 or 4 presentations that we saw are trying to implement Bakhtinian dialogue in a very non-dialogic institutional schooling, which is authoritarian by its nature, whether it's colonizing, as Carla was saying, or not colonizing, it's internally colonizing in some way. So let me just share my screen and then start with that.
Excuse me.
Do you see my screen now? Okay.
Anna, excuse me for interrupting. Here in the chat, they are asking if somebody could make a short resume in Russian of what was told, because they had problems to follow. Is there anybody who could?
We could do that only 5 minutes, because otherwise this will not. Okay, so please, 5-minute resume in Russian.
Кто там в администраторе или я сам? Но она, то есть Лайса говорила о эксперимент, который она сделала с своими ученики в гимназии, и она дала их разных текстах и разных жанров. Были песни, были поэмы и были тексты. А потом они должны сами сделать что-то творчество. И они писали сами некоторые стихи на двоих, и некоторые делали тоже иллюстрации на это стихи. А я вспоминал, что вы тоже использовали иллюстрации для того, чтобы определить, как студенты поняли и усвоили то, что читали. Вот это была главная идея ее доклада.
Okay, thank you so much, Sergio, for that. And let me then continue with my presentation. It's called Bakhtinian Ethical Ontological Dialogues in Education, or are they possible at all, and what they are. So here is a description of what my questions or the problems are and why I even started this research. Can education as a practice be dialogic in Bakhtinian sense? And what does it mean to be dialogic in Bakhtinian sense? And if so, what kind of education can support Bakhtinian dialogue? So let's first talk about this first question. Can education be dialogic in a Bakhtinian sense? So what I think that the Bakhtinian sense of dialogism in education is, I would call ethical ontological dialogism. And now I'm going to try to describe and define it in a little bit what I think this is and what we were developing in our small research group. So I define ethical ontological dialogism in education as an educational approach of creating and promoting opportunities for dialogues in which all the participants, which means students and teachers in quotation marks, because not all of them are always teachers, and I will discuss that later, they all can be in an educational event and relate to each other as what Bakhtin said, a plurality of consciousnesses with equal rights and each with its own word that combine these consciousnesses but are not merged in the unity of the event. This is from the beginning of the book about Dostoevsky, from the page 6, and the Bakhtin himself made the italics there. I just put not merged in bold, which I emphasize, not merged consciousnesses. So as you can see, I'm approaching not what the students are doing themselves and what kind of tasks are given to them, and within another kind of relationships, which is usually authoritarian relationships, or the relationships where the teacher has all the rights to give assignments, to dictate and to evaluate. But here the relationships become one-to-one, person to person with equal rights. But what does it mean with equal rights? Equal rights of what? And I want to define that a little bit more here. So what is it, consciousnesses with equal rights in general, and then specifically in education? First of all, I define, I place that within this framework. People in dialogue take each other seriously and with interest. And I would want to also say that that means they respect the other's rights to be taken seriously and with interest and demand that from the others. But what does that mean? That means they consider each other's opinions as worthy to take into consideration. What do you really think? And also to be heard. They consider each other's opinions with interest, that you really want to understand and know, and something interesting going on there in dialogue. They consider each other's opinions as worth exploring, like how do you mean it, why do you say that, and things like that. They want to know the reasons that each other have for forming their opinions, as I already said. Why do you say that, and based on what? They want to test their own ideas and opinions in the light of each other's alternative views, ideas, and opinions. In other words, they have something important to tell the others in that moment and in general. And they think that the other has something important to tell them in that moment and in general. So something that matters to all of them. And that's why there is the ontologic in the title of this kind of approach, because it's something that is that matters to everyone. And in this way, how I unpacked it, I think this is the ethical way of treating another person with consideration, with full attention, with interest, of course, in dialogue there and in education. This doesn't also mean that you must do it to everyone, because that's another part that we can discuss later, that in education, participation has to also be free. So what kind of education would be conducive to a Bakhtinian dialogue? From this kind of point of view of changing these kinds of relationships, I already said most of our current schools and universities are not dialogic as a principle, not only as an instrument of education to promote certain predefined goals, but they don't have a dialogic stance in general. That's not their philosophical and ideological orientation. So traditional schools do not promote ethical ontological dialogism because they treat students in an authoritarian way. They legitimate relating to others as consciousness with equal rights. There is always power over the students, and if the students are not complying, even if they are, there is a considerable violence, violence with giving grades, violence with sometimes, of course, physical violence, and the psychological violence whatsoever. We can go later into all these details. There are innovative progressive schools based on a progressive ideology that wanted to get rid of this authoritarian oppressive approach and to take much more the student into consideration, starting from Jean-Jacques Rousseau saying that you have to teach the students what you want them to learn, but in such a way that they love it, that they think they want to learn it. But I claim that these kinds of authoritative schools patronizes and manipulates the student and hijack their subjectivity for its ulterior preset goals. At the end of the day, you still have to learn what the teacher tells you to learn and nothing else. So the students' interests, opinions, desires take place there only in only as used to promote what the teachers, what the institution has to give them or impose on them. So then there is a third type of schools, democratic schools, and some of them come closest to promoting ethical ontological dialogism in education. There's a little mistake here. But of course, what are the democratic schools? I think that most educators who are not interested in alternative education per se are not very familiar. So I will just very quickly describe what is a liberal democratic school. And here I stress also liberal because a democratic school does not have to be anti-authoritarian. It could be illiberal school too, by decision of everyone in the school. So first of all, in democratic schools, regardless of what they are, before we go into the liberal, the idea is that all participants in the school, staff, as they call themselves, not teachers always, and students, administrators, and cleaners, or whoever is their parents, have a right to participate in deliberating and making decisions about all aspects of the institution, living live aspects, and also educational aspects. But I don't want to go more into these mechanics. I want to just talk about certain ideological principles on which liberal democratic schools are based on. First of all, education is understood to belong to the personal sphere of negative freedom. And I take that terminology from Isaiah Berlin, who wrote about two kinds of freedom. And he said that there very often people do not differentiate these types and very quickly fall from each to another. So what is negative freedom? Negative freedom, very simply said, is a freedom from, like, you are allowed to do whatever you want unless there is something forbidden. So if it's forbidden to go to pass in this street, you're still free to go any other street you want. Nobody will tell you how you will go except that limitation. So there is a bubble of personal freedom where nobody can tell you what to do, how to do it, why to do it. So that's the negative freedom. On the other hand, the positive freedom is the freedom for something, like everything else is forbidden unless it's specifically allowed to be done. And so there, what is allowed is prescribed. Very often, it could be self-prescribed, but it very often is prescribed by others, society, and it's for your own good, because we want you to become empowered, strong, knowledgeable, so you must do that. Everything else you cannot do, but here within this, you can have a lot of room. So that's the positive freedom. So in liberal democratic schools, education is understood to belong to this personal sphere of negative freedom. So it's the business of the students. And negative freedom is guaranteed and limited through the democratic decision-making. So this democratic decision-making, we can make rules in the democratic school that certain things can be or not be, and in that way, limit this personal bubble, what you are allowed to do or allowed what's the space in which you can maneuver. The sphere of negative freedom is maximized as much as possible. That's why they are liberal. Illiberal societies or democratic schools minimize the sphere. In a democratic school, self-education is legitimate. And Eugene talked few days ago about self-education as a Bakhtini, the only education that would promote the Bakhtinian regime. And I would say that I agree. We worked on that very much together. So the first political principle of the Bakhtinian dialogue in education is a student's self-education, where the student is the final authority to define their own education. This is where the democratic schools have potential to promote Bakhtinian a kind of ethical ontological dialogue, as I see. So I now want to present to you a case of potentially ethical ontological dialogue in a liberal democratic school that happened for real. I will play a small movie from a school that's one of the oldest democratic school that we know. It's Summerhill School in England, which was founded exactly 100 years ago. And this video was made when the school was 70 years old. I will tell you what is in the movie very shortly, a synopsis, but while I'm telling in English, I will display Russian translation of what I will say. And I'm sorry if there are mistakes, it is just a Google Translate of the Russian text. So what you will see in this movie, first of all, is a General Assembly meeting. And in this General Assembly meeting, where all adults and children of various ages, the school is for children of elementary ages until the end of the high school, they are sitting together discussing all things that people bring to this meeting. And the video starts with one girl, Stacy, wants to call a tribunal because she has a big complaint. She accuses another girl, Mavra, that she stole her makeup case. That's why we call it a case of stolen makeup. And Mavra denies it dramatically and says she gave it to another girl, Donna. Donna says, no, you're lying, and this is not so. And so then the tribunal leader, Henry, who is a boy, says, what are the proposals? What are we going to do? And there is a proposal by the house parent. This is a boarding school, so children live there and spend their whole life there. And the house parent, Matthew, he says, let's form a search party. Let's find out where this case is, and we'll search several girls' rooms. And in the party, he names mostly boys, although there are some girls, but boys probably are not involved in stealing that. And he says this area should be searched only without the girls present there. And so they start the search, you will see that. But one girl, Tamsin, does not want to leave her room. She says boys cannot go through her private things, and it's not fair, so they have to reconvene. And this girl again says, yes, I am not going to leave the room. And she is supported by another female science teacher, Dolly. And so then the house parent, Matthew, who proposed all of that, he says, well, we only wanted to help you. And there were girls on the committee. And if you don't want that, then you should drop the case. Or if you do, we have to do it that way. Stacy then drops the case, and that ends. And then you have a little bit of the dialogue at the end between Stacy and her friend Donna in the evening, where they complain to each other about the children on the other students in the party. They're incredibly offended that one of the boys says, so what is she hiding behind her pillow? Maybe a vibrator or something like that. And they say that the founder of the school, A.S. Neal, who already is dead, would turn in his grave if he was here. So that's what you will see in this movie. It's very fast, although it is 7 minutes, and they speak very fast English. I'm sorry I didn't have subtitles, so that's why I told you this whole story and tried to catch the whole thing.
Summerhill School was founded in 1921 by A.S. Neal.
Stacey.
Another tribunal case. What's it about? Marva, she's lost about 17 quid of mine. It's not in money, but it's about in makeup. A shitload, and it's expensive. And a makeup bag.
Okay. What about Jonas? Question. Because night after dark is like after. What about should I try to do like this? What against? Carry. Denver, get back. Get back.
Okay. I've given Marva 3 days to give these back because about 3 days ago we had a fight, and it was in her room on the table by her bed, yes, at the end of her bed. And she said she gave it to Donna to give to me. Now that is total crap. That is total bullshit. She never gave it to Donna. I want my fucking makeup back, and if she's lost it, she's gonna have to pay for it.
Mama, you said you gave me the makeup, and that is a complete lie. I couldn't understand why you lie like that. You never gave it back to me. I would give it to Stacey if you gave it to me. Christ almighty, you know I would. That's a fucking lie.
You came in, took it out, okay? And that is not a lie. You said, can I have the bag because Kirsty wants it, okay?
Lorraine, 2p fine.
And you just want to fight me.
Roger.
I agree with Martha.
I propose that an ombudsman side deals with it and then brings it back to special legal side because we're just going to argue about it forever. Maybe the I'm making a proposal that an ombudsman deals with it, okay? As well. Yeah, I'm taking your proposals. Thank you.
I've got a proposal. And the proposal is that the following people now act as an investigation committee. And those people are Henry, Rowley, Tomo, Roger, Mirai, Isabella, Sarah Fox, Naomi, and there's one other person. Who's the other person? Tomo, did I mention you? Yeah. Albert. Okay, and that they have the power now to go and search the following areas, which are Mavra's room, Kirsten's room, Tamsin's room, the girls' shack, and Diana's room. That's my proposal. The other thing in that proposal is that nobody's allowed to go into those areas until they've been searched.
No, I'm not getting out.
How can you kick her out of her own fucking room?
See what you're doing in my room.
She has a goddamn orthodontal appointment, and how dare they?
Oh no.
At least I can do it when she's there. I mean, Christ, how dare they? They have no rights.
They have got a right that they can go in. Okay.
What do you want me to say for you?
Say that I've got a right to be in here.
Let's go, come on.
No, it's my room.
Okay, then we'll stay in here.
Good, let's do it.
Wait for me, okay, Donna? Okay.
Me and Albert and Tomo went down to Tamsin's room, and Tamsin is saying that she doesn't want us to search her room when she's not in there because she doesn't. I mean, it's kind of like she's saying it's her right and her privacy, and that it's only fair that way. And but I think I'm not sure what the proposal was. I think it was that they're not in there and that no one goes in there. But she's saying that she thinks that's completely unfair. And we're calling a special meeting to clarify it, find out what's happening.
I think I should at least be allowed to have the right to be in there while I can search into all my stuff.
Well, Donna, it was voted on in the meeting, you know? Just so you...
Okay, I'm trying to Dudley.
I just think it really stinks that there's a whole load of blokes searching the girl's room. I mean, they're all sorts of private things, you know.
Yeah.
And then know sort of what kind of tampons she used and everything else. And I mean, if it was my room, I'd really want to be there to know what parts of my private life to know about.
to try and get some girls on the investigation committee. We did, but the problem is that most of the other girls were involved in it in some form or other. These guys brought the case. We're trying to do it for them, and we're trying to clear the whole thing up. And now they're the ones that make it awkward. I mean, if you choose to drop your case, then drop your case. But you know, if you want us to do the case, let's do it this way.
This is causing so much hassle, might as well just drop the case. They were just looking and giggling and saying, oh, they just wanted the money. Now that is complete bollocks.
But listen, you know, I mean, this is one of the privileges of being a carriage kid. You know, you get your own room, you get your own dressers, you know, you get your own things, and you're allowed to put whatever the hell you want to put in them without Roger, who's a fucked up little boy, Mirai, who's also a fucked up little boy, and Tiashius is also a fucked up little boy. They're all this little gang. And Big Matthew, the staff, has these favorites, and he'll do that. And he said, "Oh, I'm trying to put as much girls on it as I can." You know, that is complete bullshit. Isabella, Sarah, that's all I can remember.
I know.
Naomi.
They were even slagging off Tamsin, saying, "Oh, she might have a vibrator under her pillow." That is the worst thing I've ever heard in Summerhill. The way they had the guts to say that in front of me. I just told them to fuck off and not to slag her off, and they fucking well did shut up. They're fucking scared of us.
And also, Stacey, you're never gonna get your stuff back.
I know, that really sucks.
You have to know that now. You're never gonna get it back. And Margaret just lies through her teeth because she knows she can't get away with it. I mean, all the staff here have no idea, you know, no idea what Neil would think. Neil's probably turning over in his grave right now.
Like, the staff should be considered as carriage kids. They should have to propose that they're allowed to smoke in there. They should have to propose that they can do whatever they please, because they can just go downtown any time of the night. I think there should be an actual age group. You can't go downtown with less than 3 people, even if you are a staff. Because staff can just go downtown at 12 o'clock at night, go to the pub and get pissed and come back at 3 in the morning. Now that fucking sucks if the kids can't do that.
That is the end of the video. I hope you got it, at least in a gist, if not in every detail. And I have some questions for all of us. Is this a Bakhtinian ethical ontological dialogue in education? And what place should Bakhtinian ethical ontological dialogism have in education, if any? And what do you think? Thank you very much. I'm open. Dialogue is part of my presentation for everyone to say, what do you think about the possibility of ethical ontological dialogue? Is this an example of it? If yes, why? If yes, no, not. What do you think about the whole thing? Yes, Sergey.
So this is a good illustration among many of the dangerous illusion that you can get rid of power structures just by saying they're not there. Power relationships are very much there. You could see when the staff member is just proposing the search party, it was very obvious that, well, oh yeah, I'm just proposing that. He's very confident the proposal is going to be accepted. Clearly that person has power. The gender relations are power relations, and they're very much on display in this episode, obviously. I also know there's a very strong democratic school movement here in Israel. And, I've discussed that with you and Eugene a couple of times. It's very clearly an elitist school system, right? So pupils coming, students coming, here it is, students coming from not so privileged backgrounds feel estranged, don't feel they belong, and leave the school very quickly. That's also a power dynamic, right? So unless you do active work to discuss and dismantle power dynamics, you're going to be stuck. Democracy be damned, right?
Actually, Sergey, Jim Rittmulder, who is one of the founders of another school here in the United States called the Circle School, he talks about power a lot. And he talks about two forms of power: informal power that I think you're talking here, and formalized power. And in a democratic school, not all of them, but in some of them that are liberal, they are trying to formalize power in such a way that it doesn't have this informal, devastating effect. So for instance, in this, I know that in Summerhill School, they could have voted this down. And in the Circle School, they could have voted it down. Absolutely, they would have a right to do that. So,
they have a right, but they didn't do it. And it doesn't look accidental. It doesn't look accidental. It does look that the person proposing looks very confident that this is a proposal that's going to pass. I mean, and I'm also speaking from a quite extensive
I agree with you.
Experience in consensus decision-making situations.
And
you know when somebody is confident, right?
Power cannot be and should not be eliminated because it's a nature of the relationships. But the way is what is and how is it controlled and in what situations, that becomes a very interesting thing about the democratic schools and about education in itself.
Obviously, again, questions again.
The girls stopped the search that would have male power in there.
Yes, following a pretty traumatic experience for them. Already at that point, you have a search party coming for you into your private room. Imagine yourself being in this situation. Okay, it's not a pleasant experience, and I'm putting it very mildly. Especially for a young woman.
And Bakhtinian dialogue is not only about pleasant experiences.
No, but I think.
Can I jump? Can I jump on that? I think Sergey, you're right that on many things I agree with you on many levels. But what's interesting in my view in that episode, in a way, the girls initially, at least some most like involved girls were interested to find out where is the makeup and who stole that, and some of them have very clear idea who did this, and they want to investigate that. So the male proposals about searching rooms sounds like rather logical, reasonable, and so on and so forth, until they start, as you said, suddenly faced to that, and they start finding that this is a terrible idea. What's interesting for me that in that particular school, I don't know about others, a voice of one girl who disturbed and managed to stop that. Look at this. They make decision and they start carrying out. And one girl said no, and she deferred it back to the assembly. And the community or whatever people who had power submitted to her desire to return back to the assembly. There is new problem which is conflict between searching for makeup and female privacy, which is, in my view, maybe I'm misunderstood. I love to talk with the participants of that, because I feel, at least from the video, that males, including adult male, couldn't understand female privacy and even their concern. For them, it sounds like, what's that? Big deal. At least how I read body of the male's bodies there. Again, I could be wrong because I could misread things. And nevertheless, I think it's a very powerful when this female voice prevail. And that's, for me, is fascinating. And I agree with you, it's not easy to go against, especially majority, and you're right about that, many other things. I agree with you. But that episode, for me, is fascinating exactly because voice of one person become powerful enough to stop this collective decision.
And yeah,
and it's not easy, and it's very uncomfortable whole thing, which is exactly how Dostoevsky's dialogues are. It's always scandals, and this is for me a scandal. You know, it's on many different levels. There are many scandals. It's not one scandal. There are many scandals, as you can see.
Yeah, and yet, I mean, I'm not saying that a school that tries at least to be democratic is not is worse than a school that is not even trying to do that. You can definitely have a much clearer power disparities than that, much more institutionalized ones. But the problem is that informal and relatively soft power disparities, if left unattended, can grow resistance to the formal structure.
Definitely,
Right.
Definitely. And that is why...
and then become even worse in some situations.
That's true. That's one of the problems of the democratic schools. And that's where they have a constant discussion. Like in the Circle School, they have at least weekly, and in this Summerhill School, meetings about exactly what's right, what's wrong, constantly creating boundaries, rules, norms, and trying them out, and sometimes keeping them on the books for many years, so that next generations don't even know what it was about. And so that is one very important part of their educational environment, exactly talking about all these forms of human relationships and power over each other, and who can do what or not and why. But they do it in many, in these kinds of meetings. And there are some other forms of, for instance, they have a so-called judiciary committee where people who broke the rules can be put on the investigation and trial, have, like in the United States, a jury, they can have pros and cons. So it's a huge dialogic event. In a way, I'm sorry I could not tape one because they didn't let me when I was visiting, because they didn't want to be observed by anybody on the outside. It was a case of a broken toy that one boy broke, you know, those little, do you know, small finger skateboards? You do them with fingers, and they are some very expensive, and that became broken. And then it was a case like not only who broke, by why broke, and a lot, and it went for 3 days and was reconvened, and just incredible dialogue about first what happened, investigative things, and second, whose rights are what, and who misunderstood what, and what would you do or should do and say, and things like that. So
thank you. I see that Sergio raising the hand. I will try to mediate because Anna is double role.
Yes, please.
That's okay. No, that's okay. That's okay. Go ahead, Sergio.
Sergio.
I have two questions. One related to the video and the democratic school idea, and the other one to the debate that Eugene opened before, and I think it's very important and to go back to that. So first, I was fascinated by Summerhill when I knew about it. I read the book when I was an angry young man, 17, 18, and I read Wilhelm Reich, and I was trying to explain to my friends that we also should do the same revolution. But later on, when I know more about the results of Summerhill and the problems that some of the students had going out in the real world, for instance, that's a point, and the misjudgment, the problems, the psychic problems they had to deal with a different world that works with another rules. That's one, but I don't want to go into that. The question was about specifically about the video. What we saw in the video, it sounded to me much closer to so-called assembly democracy than a deliberative democracy. And assembly democracy, the way I see it, maybe it's because I am too philosophical, but it's closer to a mob lynching than a real dialogical event. So those who shout louder, those who push harder are the winners usually in this kind of discussion, which everybody has the same, theoretically, the same right to speak. And so I think it's a good example of how an excellent idea can degenerate. That's the way I interpreted this small video. But I think that the question that Eugene raised before is extremely important for all of us who are involved in education, and we need to reopen this debate, because what Eugene was asking Liza about her intentions and her system, and at the end of the day, if I understood rightly, is that the teacher or the staff should be value neutral in order to allow the students to be really self-educating, because I'm not very happy with this idea. I don't think that I should not try to push my anti-racism into their minds. Even if you think that this is an ideological move, I plea for that. I think that's part of education also. So I think the question you are opening is hugely important for all of us involved in education, no matter what level.
Mm-hmm. Sergio, if I may just quickly answer before Eugene and before everybody else wants to, I think that definitely in a dialogic event, all different alternative points of view, those who you like and those you don't like, have to come into consideration and be a critical analysis and deconstruction. But at the end of the day, if we are Bakhtinian, what should prevail is internally persuasive discourse that each person forms for themselves, or what you take from that discussion, without imposition of the teacher what's right. And actually, if you remember as a student, very often attempts of your teacher to so-called brainwash you, says, okay, blah, 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 again, people close up to that anyway, if they are strong enough. Or so we are just talking about Bakhtinian principles.
Yes.
Whether it would be Bakhtinian to switch from the authoritarian dialogue into internally persuasive discourse, where everybody has a right to make up their own opinion. It doesn't matter that you have a different opinion or what you like, but as a teacher, you have by default a power, as Sergio said, and erasing that power as a teacher is never possible. So your opinion may be there, but if it has the same weight as the others, honestly and sincerely, then okay. If not, then people know, okay, we can talk whatever we want. At the end of the day, this is the correct answer. Okay, opening to Kio and Eugene. Okay.
Can I?
Yes.
Yeah, Kio, please.
Okay, okay. Too short. I don't like I don't like your way to setting the problem.
Oh.
Putting the way to problem. You put some, let's say, the correct answer or the justice, E or D there. Then you classify the schools, one school, the one type of school, the other type of school, the other type of school. And you classify it, okay, and this one is not okay from this, criterion. This one not okay from this criterion, and this one is okay from this criterion. The whole way of the discussion is very, very categorical. And for me, it's very, very un-Bakhtinian for as far as I understand. And maybe it's very clear, but it's too much clear maybe. And and you use, as you are kind of say, unit of analysis, the school. And school is actually, any school is an institution and it's a kind of form. What is important is the, as far as I understand Bakhtin, important is concrete now and present. Well, what is occurring now and present? In any school, maybe in this film footage, it's happened in Summerhill. Not in the Summerhill, but at that moment, that space, it occurred. And I should say that it can be occurred in every system, in every school, in principle, it can be occurred. Of course, we have to investigate what kind of factors are working, but factors, I don't like this factor because it's also another categorical thing. But anyhow, for example, how teacher work is also actually important. But the point is, something like that, what you show in your footage, can be occurred in any type of school because it kind of surpasses a type. Mm-hmm. And I believe that in the so-called, as you know, my methodology is always making a dialogue with my fellow teachers. Not all teachers, I have to say. The teachers I select based on my own value system. Mm-hmm. The teachers who I think he's great, she's great. And all these teachers show the moment, and these teachers working in many of them are working in public school. Of course, it's a very, very authoritative, especially in Japan with very hard national curricula. So very authoritative, but still in the class, I mean, not the class as a system, but as a class, as a process, in the lesson, I should say. Sometimes it occurs that children show something very, very funny, very, very interesting, and show their agency, using Eugene's word, maybe they were the author at the time. I don't say that it's a kind of the, because of the school system. And I think that it's not because of the teachers. I mean that I don't make it the teachers' responsibility 100%, but still, it's somehow teacher as a person did something, and because of that. And your way of presentation denied such kind of, how can I say, unique person's experience, because it's very categorical. So I somehow agree with you that in the authoritative system, it's very difficult for the teacher, and any system is authoritative. So every teacher has some moment, authoritative moment, yes, but still there is a possibility, or I should say, if we don't believe of that possibility, we cannot go anywhere. Of course, I don't think that your view is that, okay, let's convert every school, let's convert to the school like Summerhill. Of course not, it shouldn't be that. But your way of talking, your system, your view implies that. How do you think about that?
Thank you, Kyo. You raised a very important question. I was talking about what I considered what kind of schools would promote this kind of dialogue. and definitely not talking about what's a good school, what's a bad school. I think dialogism, and specifically Bakhtinian approach, is very, not only polyphonic, but is not monological and not monistic, but pluralistic in itself. And from Bakhtinian point of view, I would argue that people, including students, should have a right to organize and have schools that are good for them in any way they want. I also agree that in every school, no matter how authoritarian, there are pockets of dialogue. And here I want to just compare that with your own studies of play. So you can say that the little children play no matter in what kind of system they are. In a most oppressive system where they don't have a lot of time, they'll find a way to play, and there will be some play, but it doesn't mean that this daycare center promotes play as such. It doesn't see value in that play. So I was just talking about an educational institution that would see the value of that kind of a dialogue. And in that sense, yes, I may have come to be categorical, but I don't think that I would not impose definitely that every school be like summer skills school or like any kind of school that I wanted, but I would like to discuss with everybody who has their own values and systems what and for what is good. There are different ways of education and for different occasions, and some of them cannot or should not be dialogical. Like if you teach me how to drive, I shouldn't discuss whether the red light is really stop or not really stop. I should know that this is a rule, I have to stop on the red light. It should not be part of my opinion. There should be no dialogue about the traffic rules, you know. And so I'm just using this extreme thing to say that it's much more complicated. But I do agree with you that dialogue happens in all kinds of schools, and where the schools have a lot more, let's say, student-centered approach, even though it doesn't have to be Bakhtinian, they have a lot more space for such a dialogue. Mm-hmm. That's my answer. Eugene?
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Thanks, Anna, for very interesting answer and terrific questions here. I love that. This has become more Bakhtinian now. We disagree, passionately disagree. That's what, in my view, part of the Bakhtin is.
And makes us think deep.
Yeah. The next thing, we should start yelling at each other and say the word fuck in English, because it's much easier for foreigners to say that than natives, usually. This is kind of like maybe part of the myth that may be correct about swearing in your native language becomes, for some people, more difficult than in foreign language. But to be on the serious part, you know what? How I hearing Anna's presentation, not because that's Anna's intention, no, that's my distortion. This is how I like. What's interesting for me, what I found interesting. You know what I found interesting, and this is related to my presentation of 2 days ago. I recently started thinking about what kind of dialogue and education will look like. What we call Bakhtinian dialogues, which is Dostoevsky's dialogue, actually. What Bakhtin, because Bakhtin analyzed all these dialogues in work of Dostoevsky. And in my view, this what Anna presented is very close to what Dostoevsky might write. Let me provide why I think that. Well, it's definitely a very ontological dialogue. It's about passion. It's about drama. It's a scandal. It's about person ideas. There are very clear person ideas. I can give you several person, like definitely that female person idea about privacy versus male person ideas. That the most important thing is how logically find out where is the makeup, who stole it, and where is that. That's different person ideas, and they colliding with each other, very violent in almost violent way, but in dialogue. Okay, and they're going in many different things and many other things. We can analyze it. But the bigger things for me is, by the way, that type of dialogues resist institutionalization. And I can see that, and that's part of what we were talking about. They resist civility as well, by the way. They're not very civil. And they resist civility. By the way, read Dostoevsky's work. You will not find much civility in the dialogues that you will hear that. And that's what Bakhtin is attracted. But the question is, for me, should be education be dialogic? From Bakhtinian point of view, maybe not. Maybe we should. In this case, Kio, raising a good question about why we should immediately jump on the back wagon of Bakhtin. There are certain things might attract that, but maybe not exact. Maybe we should take one thing, but not the other thing from Bakhtinian dialogue, and also about institution. Maybe it's true, Kio and Anas provided good answer to that, that dialogue can happen anywhere, including concentration camps. But should we promote concentration camps just because dialogue might happen there? Not necessarily, not necessarily. And we might think about imagining the place where dialogue's flourishing, and maybe schools or institutions, better to say, not the best place for that. And we might, that could be big discovery, and we start thinking about that. So in this case, I'm very much welcoming, Anas, your presentation. But of course, I also hear strong value judgments. And in my view, there is nothing wrong. The pluralism and visionary, passionate visionary, do not contradict each other.
Yeah.
They don't contradict. It's like freedom of speech. From the fact that you proponent of freedom of speech, it doesn't mean that you cannot be passionate in what you think and disagree with other speech, which you think that should be there as well. And in my view, both of them can be combined. And this categorism here is defendable from dialogic point of view, unless it's true when it's become total. When it's become total, when you say my way or free way or monopoly of my categorism on everybody else, that's a big problem, of course. When you're exactly pointing out on that, when you say we should do everything like that, that's a huge problem. I agree with you. And I think, Anna, it's nice kind of clarification of what you did, that you will not try to avoid that. But please do not down your passionate voice and your passionate values, because they're important.
Right.
And
I'm also, passionate, but on the other hand, I really wanted to finish my presentation with our whole discussion. I consider this part of the presentation because I have questions more than answers, and I really enjoy, Kio, that you raised that it's so categorical. And I'm thinking, why did you see it when that? On one hand, yes, it was my intention to create a criteria of Bakhtinian ethical ontological dialogue in education, like taking each other seriously. If you go by what I wrote there, all of this happens in this dialogue. But is this always good, or sometimes good? When is it good? And all of that are my questions exactly. Second, I also want to clarify just and not water down that when I say ethical ontological dialogue, I don't mean the dialogue is ethical, but the dialogue is about ethical issues, about values, about relationships among students. So it doesn't mean that, there was a lot of things that you would agree or disagree ethically what happened in this event, but it was an ethical dialogue for me. An ethical dialogical dialogue because it mattered to people and because it was about values, about relationships, especially then the reflection at the end of those two girls, how they felt and what happened there and why. And yes, it was about power relationships, as Sergei immediately pointed out. There is a very big, I think, error by all of us to think immediately that when we say democratic, it means no power. And that's really not true. And that's one thing. And another thing, when we say democratic, that means freedom for everyone, but freedom in a sense that democracy is freedom. No, democracy is a way of organizing power, just like every other ruling system. Autocracy or meritocracy or cracy means power, actually, so democracy just means that everybody has a way to participate, do their offers, and probably vote it doesn't mean that everybody's opinion must prevail. And so just a little clarification. So I'm still interested what other people think about this particular, or if you can imagine another or have experienced another ethical ontological dialogue in education that in some way is important to you. Okay, Silviana.
Well, I think there are some things in your talk that and people's participation too, that it's about Bakhtinian dialogue, prompting novelty, I think, in discussions. And another thing that I understand from your talk is that we are analyzing a historical interaction. It's not happening in our times. So there is the novelty of that's related to that time of when the discourse happened and when that interchange happened. So the novelty is there. I know you like to analyze all these historical data as examples of good interactions, but if you also remember us that these are historical interactions that brought up novelty in schools, and as examples of democratization, historical democratization in schools. So we can also see all these different historical levels of emerging possibilities of democratization. So I don't know, but I always enjoy a lot your data because they bring this remembering of novelty at that time, and the feminist talk and the liberty to discuss. And this happened because there was a context that promoted that. And then from that time on, we started to experience different ways of doing democratization school and applying Bakhtinian dialogism in schools. I don't know. What do you think about that?
Well, it's very complex. I don't think that we can change history by decree for certain things. And we live in a time and space where is a lot defined for us. But we certainly can, with our doings and living in the world, try to change the history toward values that we see important and good. And without that, nothing would change, you know. So in that sense, I think it's very important to examine very, really concrete particular events like this one, and that comes from Bakhtinian and the Bakhtinian point of view, and try to figure out where people are caught and where they can innovate in their thinking. You know, everything starts from people imagining something that does not exist yet. And where they can really fly away from the given and transcend that and try something to see if it's good or not, and how much the society is liberal. And again, that's nobody's decision. It depends on so many things that we should not go in all the details. When the societies can be more liberal or not. Monarchies can be much more liberal than some democracies or so-called democracies. Like, for instance, the Austro-Hungarian Empire was extremely liberal in some senses, also liberal in some other senses. So that's a very interesting question.
While the United States at the same time, in democratic United States at the same time, there was slavery.
Right.
I have a question related to this comment of Silviana. I think that I agree that we have to put the schooling in context, and if we think in precisely in a chronotopic sense, we can say that what Laisa explained before, in a way, she's interacting with her environment. Not only she and his students. She's interacting with an environment. He began his narrative with a couple of examples from the situation now and there in Brazil, in the middle of a huge attack against liberties with the new Bolsonaro regime, and with institutionalized homophobia, and with a backlash of all the victories of minorities in Brazil. And she's, with his authoritarian teaching, she's trying to defend the values that are a danger in that society. And I am saying at the same time at Eugene, maybe, yeah, she's not neutral. Maybe she's pushing his own agenda in some direction. And I thank you, Laisa, for doing that, because that's exactly what young Brazilians need at this moment. Some arguments against the new current, which is surrounding them, and which is terribly reactionary. So this is also a way to, in my way, this is also a Bakhtinian pastupak.
Right. No, I completely agree. We live in times which are very liberal, and pushing a little bit against that is risky and brave. And we all work, almost all work in institutions that are not liberal in United States and all around the world. And pushing against that is also risky in many different ways, and tripped all the time. So making spaces, as you say, Kio, for a good dialogue in authoritarian, otherwise school is a valuable thing. I'm not saying that it's bad in any way, and I don't want to diminish that. Yet my question was really to imagine, maybe not only democratic schools, what kind of, first of all, what kind of Bakhtinian dialogue would really be good in education, and what kinds, let's say not one type, and for what kind of education, and when not, really. There are other ways of education. Let's say there is education not only in cognitive sciences or social sciences, but all kinds of art education that is based also on sensory and on a person's experiences that are not only dialogical, but you have to value other kinds of experiences. But my question was very narrow, really.
Excuse me if I'm boring you with so many questions, but the subject is fascinating. And there is also an issue that was in the speech of Olga before. She's a teacher of Russian language and literature as fair language. So she's teaching their mother tongue to the students. And she was talking also of a problem that is it's global, and we find it also in Spain and in Europe, in Latin America, and it's the poverty of the language of the school children. So they have at the beginning, they don't have even the words to develop a few sentences to explain themselves. And so I think that's a kind of precondition before we can achieve a real dialogue. So a way of empower the students is, first of all, give them the linguistic tools to articulate their arguments and to explain them. А сейчас я спрошу Ольга, если вы меня поняли, потому что я...
Yeah, sorry, we're only in English. Somebody should do something in Russian. Sorry.
Вы помнили меня, я говорил про вас как раз. Как важно, что ученики, прежде всего, усвоят только хорошее знание его родной язык, для того, чтобы потом могли поступить в диалог и выразить свои идеи или иметь настоящую либеральную дискуссию. То есть это как предпосылок для того.
Yeah, Olga, please unmute yourself.
Микрофон, если вы хотите говорить.
Серджио, спасибо. Мне кажется, это очень важным, чтобы в диалоге была задана, в диалоге между учителем и учеником, и между учеником и учеником была высота. Была высота.
Да.
Даже не в контекстах этики я сейчас говорю, в максимально широких контекстах сути человека, личности, восхождения, в том смысле, о котором говорит Рубинштейн, но о котором говорит Мамардашвили, Ницше, я не знаю, кто-то еще, когда, преодолевая человеческое в человеке, я восхожу. Вот очень важно, чтобы диалог мы не применяли к ситуации обмена репликами на пути взаимопонимания. Мне кажется, не в этом смысл диалога. Диалог – это конструирование себя, меня, в общении с тобой, с другим. Я себя конструирую, нахожу себя в тебе и конструирую себя понимаю. Когда этого нет, то вообще правильно ли говорить, что это диалог? Не размывает ли это понятие, не принижает ли это понятие диалога?
Да.
Спасибо, Серджио, за вашу помощь. Как могу, Google переводчик пользуюсь. Спасибо.
I think Olga asking very important question. Would you translate, please, Sergio, and somebody should answer.
Yes. She told us that she didn't, by dialogue, she didn't understood just the exchange of opinions. First, I speak first, and then you answer, and then I speak again. But it's an objective of a personal growth process. So the idea is that each individual achieves a certain peak when he himself is also a dialogical person. So if I probably understood, you were in this sense. And then you can also go into dialogue with others, but it's more about an experience which enriches each of us.
It is a very interesting question, Olga. And I will speak slowly, and whoever wants to translate, because I think it's important for me to answer to Olga, not to everybody just. So I think of dialogue not only about these big heights and peaks, but I think of the big heights and peaks that can come in every situation or not. They can suddenly shine. The situation or conversation may look very pedestrian, but you don't know for whom that will be the spark of something that will actually make them transcend and construct their own I, if they feel that they have that legitimate right. I think talking here about situations that are very often educational, and Bakhtin talked about that deaden possibility. They make them dead. There is no possibility for sparkling ideas in educational dialogues that don't promote internally persuasive discourse, in my view. It doesn't mean that what for me is deadly dialogue would be deadly for everyone. Like somebody who could come to our conference now, who is not in Bakhtin, would think that we are just completely crazy people and would not find anything interesting or important. It would be just like talking about Martians. Or if you listened to somebody discussing things in nuclear physics right now. But that could be on every level. What for me would be important, for instance, to even look in these two girls is what ideas there are meaningful for me if I was a student there, or I could have been a student there who said, I'm really not interested in anything they're talking. So in that sense, I think that important things, we cannot predict what's the height for everyone. There is no one rule, but promoting just occasions for very freely, I mean, legitimate dialogue, if really in that sense that everybody has a right, and they can feel that right, that nobody's going to ridicule, nobody will tell them you don't know anything, nobody will tell them you don't count, or now is not the time for that, or something like that. And when you constantly close your mouth and don't say what you think because you can get a bad grade, or you're very ashamed that you will not say English word in the right way, that is stifling in education. This is, I think, that how I understood your comment.
Очень трудно привести. Она сказала, что диалог не только в высоту, но она может быть тоже пространство, где через...
Уважаемые участники конференции, извините, но у нас осталось всего 5 минут. Попробуйте уложиться в 5 минут. Мы приглашаем вас всех завтра на заключительное заседание. Оно, конечно, будет очень важным, поэтому приглашаем всех. А сегодня вот уже 4, наверное, минуты. Пожалуйста.
Our dear esteemed colleagues, we are very sorry to let you know that we have only 5 minutes left. And we welcome you to, 4 minutes, But London time. Yes, right. We welcome you to tomorrow's final session. It will start at 1400 or at 2 p.m. Moscow time, 2 p.m. Moscow time. From 2 to 4 p.m. Moscow time.
Thank you very much.
We do apologize again.
All right, thank you very much, and thank you very much for participating in our conversation and our dialogue. And see you tomorrow, I guess.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye bye.
Sergio, thank you, especially.
Bye. Thank you, спасибо.
Bye. Bye, everyone.
Thank you, everybody. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Let's go to drink coffee.
Yeah. If we are in Saransk, we can go to somewhere to eat, but sorry, I have to go to bed.
Your excuse, too.